what the black man and woman needs to know about the nation, about the world, about themselves. Muhammad Speaks It. To order your 12-issue subscription to Muhammad Speaks newspaper, 313-371-7033. 313-371-7033. Kareem Bean Pie is the grand champion of all bean pies. The rich flavor and smooth texture takes this pie to a whole new level of delicious. One bite and you'll understand why people all over the country call daily to order Kareem Bean Pie. 313-371-7033. That's 313-371-7033. Kareem Bean Pie.
This bean pie is delicious.
Muhammad Speaks presents Messenger Elijah Muhammad's Teachings by Minister Khalil Shabazz every Sunday from 2 to 3 p.m. at Muhammad's Temple of Islam, 12609 East McNichols Road in Detroit.
Brothers and sisters, we rise for prayer. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent and Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent and Merciful, Soul Master's Day judgment in which we now live. The alone do we serve, and the alone seek for thine help and aid. O Allah, please guide us on the right path of those upon whom thou spell thy favors, not on the path of those upon whom thy wrath is brought down, nor those who go astray after they heard thy teachings. Say he Allah is one God. Allah is he of whom nothing is independent, but upon whom we all depend. He begetteth not, nor is he begotten, there is none like him. And I bear witness that none is to be served worth of praise besides Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. And I bear witness that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is thy true servant and last apostle. Ameen. We'd like to acknowledge the brothers and sisters that extended us the greetings of Assalamu alaikum. We have Brother Captain Hakeem from Richmond. We have Brother Minister Kamal Islam from Richmond. And we have Brother Jeffrey Shabazz from North Carolina. I'd like to say in the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, and in the name of his last and greatest messenger, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, I'd like to greet the brothers and sisters with the Nation of Islam's greeting words of peace of Assalamu alaikum. Today we'd like to talk about the book of Clarence, and the Bible does not say Jesus is black. This book of Clarence is a movie that Jay-Z came out with. And of course he's showing a black Jesus. So now all of the Israelites, they love the movie. So now they got stuff talking about Jesus and Jews are black. I want to talk about, for a minute, how the Bible does not talk about Jesus being black. This is another thing that they say while they stealing, because the only way we know Jesus is black is because the messenger taught us that. It's not because that's what the Bible say. The Bible don't directly say nothing about the color of the prophets or Jesus. But we're going to talk about that a little later. This is another video that they have. It says Islam kills black people. It says Islam is one of the most bloody religions on earth, but you still flock to it. Just Christians with bean pies. This is what they say. They just can dog us out. So now they be saying that Muslim, anybody can be a Muslim. Like, they be saying like we just be committing sins, doing wrong. Anybody can be a Muslim. You know, we Christians with bean pies. That's what Bus Stop saying. While they still in the messenger's teachings. Now let's get into what the Bible actually says about Jesus. The most favorite verse that everybody use is Revelations 14 through 15. It says his head and his hairs were white like wool. Because the way that they try to act like they're not stealing the teachings of the messenger is they say that King James wrote the Bible. And they say that King James was a black man. So they make it to seem like King James was writing this stuff for us to know that Jesus was black. Because Revelations 1:14 and 15 say Jesus is black. And because most people believe things off face value, they just go with that. It says his hair and his hairs were white like wool. Now the easiest way to show you what the white man was meaning is you got to know what is the definition of a head. Because it describes Jesus' head as being white. His head and his hairs were white like wool. Because the messenger taught us that Jesus was black, and it's been accepted by so many people that when you see Revelations 1:14 and 15, you just automatically assume now that that's talking about Jesus being black. But when you go to the definition of head, it says the upper part of a human body. It says, or the front or upper part of the body of an animal. It says typically separated from the rest of the body by a neck, and containing the brain, the mouth, and sense organs, which is eyes, ears, nose, and a tongue. That's what it means when you say a head. So this verse says his head and his hairs were white like wool. It's not talking about the texture of the wool. It's talking about the color of the wool. Praise to Allah. Because the messenger said King James wrote the Bible to hide the truth from the black man.
Yes.
But since Bust-Stop Bishop can steal the teachings of the messenger, he can dog Muslims, he can make us seem like we don't know what we talking about. But the Bible said Jesus was a black man. Now let's go on even further than that. Because verse 15, you might think you got something there. Because it says, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burn in a furnace. So most people will think, now that means Jesus, they saying they put Jesus' feet in a furnace and they burned it and it turned black. That's not what they saying. Messenger told us that King James had poets to write the Bible.
Yes.
So when they writing something, they writing it in poetic language.
Yes.
Now let's look at the other poetic language that they using when they talking about a furnace. This comes from Isaiah 48, verse 10. It says, behold, I have refined thee, but not with silver. I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction. Because when you talking about the Bible, it talks about how a furnace refines silver, gold, brass, tin. That's how they refine gold, silver, and brass. So God is telling the prophets, I refine you, but not with silver. It says, I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction. So let's just use that one to talk about Jesus' feet in this furnace. Because if his head is white, his arms white, his body white, and his legs white. So when it's talking about his feet, they talking about Jesus being afflicted. And he's walking through the furnace of affliction, not talking about this furnace is causing his feet to turn black. Just like it's talking about this furnace with Isaiah, it's talking about the furnace with Jesus. But let's don't stop there. Let's give another example. This comes from Psalms 12 and verse 6. It says, the words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace. of the earth, purified 7 times. Another example. They're not talking about silver being put in the furnace and being burned and turned black. It's talking about it being tried in the furnace. It's not talking about it being black. So we can use one more example. This comes from Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 20. It says, as they gather silver and brass and iron and lead and tin into the midst of the furnace to blow the fire upon it, to melt it, so will I gather you in my anger and in my fury, and I will leave you there and melt you. So this time God is using the furnace to talk about how he gonna burn you up. He ain't talking about I'm gonna put you in the furnace, this brass, so I can make it black. He talking about melting the silver and the brass and the tin. Because when they use furnace as a metaphor, they wasn't talking about putting the silver and the brass in it to make it black. They was either talking about refining it or to melt it. This is what, and when you talking about wool, they were never talking about texture. They would either talk about the color of the wool or the purity of the wool. They weren't talking about texture. Another example of a furnace. The Hebrew boys was put in the fiery furnace. Right. Furnace was never used to say, we talking about putting something in it to make it black. So if this verse Revelations 1, 14 and 15, if they already making it clear that his head and his hairs was white like wool, as white as snow, then it says his eyes were as a flame of fire. We know his eyes wasn't a flame of fire. That's just another more poetic language. Then it said, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burn in the furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. This is that poetic language. That poetic language to talk about white Jesus is not to talk about a black Jesus. Because we got to think about 1611. We can't think about the Bible was written now that you know what the messenger taught. We got to talk about the black. We can even go to 1950s black man. We ain't even got to go all the way to no 19 or 1611. 1950s black man didn't know Jesus was black. Right. 1950s black man wasn't interpreting that to say that Jesus was a black man. Right. Let's go on even further. Now let's talk about the messenger. Let's talk about him when he started teaching us all this stuff about Jesus. This is the messenger in the January 19th, 1957 Pittsburgh Carrier. The title of the article is called Challenge Elder McCoy to Prove His Charge of Falsifying of my order of falsity of my articles and the revelation of God to Muhammad. And what I love about the history is we get to see the reaction of the black man when they first heard the teachings of the messenger. Today we just so smart. We just so smart today that we just know Jesus was black. We know about mental resurrection. We know about all that stuff now. But when you go to 1957, when the messenger was writing his truth in the Pittsburgh Carrier, when you see the reaction of the black man, you can tell they never heard nothing like this before in their life. So this was a black preacher named Elder McCoy. This is the messenger. Because Elder McCoy responded to the messenger's article. This is another example about the messenger. If you responded and said something against him, he responded back to you. That's what I want to talk about, or what the example that I want to highlight. In this new school nation of Islam with this hypocrite Louis Eugene. The messenger, not only was he answering to McCoy, McCoy had responded to an article Malcolm X wrote. But since Malcolm X was talking about the teachings of the messenger responded in place of Malcolm X.
Yes, sir.
That's how the messenger got down. He was reading what you were saying to Malcolm X's article, what you were saying to his article, what you were saying about Islam, and he was ready to respond. So the messenger was responding to McCoy because of what he said about Malcolm's art. This the message. He says, secondly, Minister Malcolm is right and you are wrong about the rise from the dead, mental death. The we that he referred to are the believers like himself who believe in the truth, Allah and his messenger Muhammad, and the religion of Islam. I want to stop. That's another good point to make. When the messenger talked about a mental resurrection, he wasn't talking about black people that's talking black, like how this hypocrite Louis Eugene make you to think. When the messenger talked about a mental resurrection, he was talking about the black people who accepted his teachings and followed him. That's when you go through a mental resurrection.
That's right.
Not because you bust out Bishop and you taking the teachings of the messenger and you adding it to your thing. No, you still mentally dead. This is another fact why Bust Out Bishop and the rest of these Israelites and all these other people did not survive with the messenger. He made it perfectly clear. He said, I'm talking about a mental resurrection. And all those who are mentally resurrected are those who accept Allah, his messenger, and his religion. Those are the ones who are mentally resurrected. The rest of the people are still mentally dead. So he goes on to say, he says, most sure, the slave master killed us mentally to the knowledge of self, God and the devil for 400 years. He says, I wish that you would accept the truth so that you could rise from the dead. When one knows himself and the God of heaven and earth, the devil, enemy of Allah, and the righteous, he is called living. This is the life Minister Malcolm and thousands of others are receiving from my column in this newspaper. Crystal clear. They learning it from me. They ain't learning it from you. They ain't learning it from Noble Drew Ali. They ain't learning it from Marcus Garvey. They getting it from my column. That I'm Malcolm and thousands of others like him. Is getting it from my column. This was the message. And he say, I hope you join them. But if not, he says, those who know not self and the true God and their enemy, the devil, in reality, are called dead. He says, thirdly, Elijah McCoy, if the so-called Negroes and their slave masters are not the answer to Jesus' parable of the rich man and poor Lazarus, then where is the answer to such parables? Again, parables such as the prodigal son and the lost sheep, the ass speaking with man's voice to his rider Balaam, and most all other parables are referring to we who have been lost from our own people and country by following our enemies. You admit that once we had the worst of everything, you are still a long way from being treated right. The messenger says, for more information, write to Muhammad's Temple number 2, 5335 Greenwood Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. This was the message.
Yes, sir.
breaking down for this preacher what Malcolm X wrote in his article. Malcolm X writing in his article breaking down what mental death means. Because black people didn't understand that. Because before they started stealing from the messenger, first of all, Jesus was not no Messiah just for black people. That's the one thing black people did not say. You wasn't telling the white man that Jesus black, plus he only coming for black people. You wasn't saying that. Jesus was a Messiah for the world. When Jesus talked about a resurrection, we believed in a physical resurrection. We knew nothing about mental resurrection until the messenger. Yes. The messenger explained to us what mental resurrection means and what it means to be dead. He told us that God has come. God has come and raised him up to teach and to guide us. All of us who accept what he taught, accept Allah, accept the messenger, and accept Islam as the messenger taught, we are the ones who mentally resurrect. These are the people that Jesus is talking about. He's talking about the Muslims who follow the message. Yes. These are the only people Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about Bus Stop Bishop. He ain't talking about that hypocrite Louis Eugene. He's talking about the people who accept the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Yes. That's what the good news is. That's it. The good news of the gospel of Jesus is talking about the coming of the Savior to raise a messenger for the black man. Yes, sir. That's the good news. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he goes on. This was in January 19th, 1957. This came out July 20th, 1957. It says, Islam, the true religion, the so-called Negro salvation. It says the history of Jesus, birth and death, and what it means to you and me. Never before did the black man have Jesus explain to us what his life, his birth, and his death meant to us. Right. Because when you talking about Bus Stop Bishop, this is another thing that I love about history. When you look at Bus Stop Bishop, all they do is take the Bible, go straight to the verse, and tell you what it means. That's how you can tell they stealing from the messenger. All them years, it took the messenger to explain Jesus to the black man. To where you mean to tell me without no books, without no previous nothing, you can just go to the Bible and talk about the mother wheel. Right. Without no previous talking about nobody who told you nothing, you just go to Ezekiel and say, that's talking about them UFOs you see. You can just go straight to the Bible and talk about the Ancient of Days. You can go straight to the Bible and talk about Lazarus. All this we as Muslims let them do without saying a mumbling word. But the messenger taught all these years. It took him to explain Jesus. And we let Bus Stop Bishop just take the Bible and say right here talking about the mother plant. This talking about the lost sheep. This the messenger in 1957 telling us about, it says the history of Jesus, birth and death, what it means to you and me. Just got to show one more picture. This is what Bus Stop and them was doing in the 50s and the 60s. Being Jews. Jews rejected Jesus. We always got to make that point. They was not concerned with explaining to the black man nothing about Jesus. Right. Because Jesus did not come for the black race. Jesus came for the Jews. This is why history, the messenger said, history is best qualified to reward our research.
That's right.
You got to know what went down yesterday to properly understand what's going on today. Because when you read these black Jews, they always would say that the Jews was black. The first Jews was black. They always would say that. But what they saying meant was a Jew is not what Bus Stop Bishop and all these Israelites saying is a Jew now, that they still in the teachings of the messenger. When you was a Jew, before the messenger made the Bible black, being a Jew was a religion. That's what it meant to be a Jew. To be a Jew meant you wore small hats. To be a Jew meant you did bar mitzvahs. To be a Jew meant you was better than any other black person you saw. But all being a Jew meant was a religion. The Jews rejected Jesus. Black Jews and white Jews. Jews rejected the New Testament. Black Jews and white Jews. Until the messenger taught us the true history of Jesus. That's what we got to know. We can't get tripped up when you hear these bus stops talking about, we always thought the Jew. Yeah, you thought the Jews was black. But you thought that the white man was a Jew too. You felt like the black man had to be born a Jew to be a Jew. This is very important information for us to know today. Because God only chose one person to teach and guide the black man. And all of us who accepts him must let the black man know it's only one. It ain't 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 people. God only chose one. The only people God gonna choose is the one that chose his message. They ain't choosing everybody. If you didn't choose him, he ain't choosing you.
Right.
So let's go on with what the messenger said in the July 20th, 1957 Pittsburgh carrier. The messenger says, I won't be able to give a complete knowledge in one article. It will take series of articles to tell of all the prophets of God who are recorded in the Bible and Holy Quran Sharif. He says none is more controversial than the history of Jesus, and none is more misunderstood. This misunderstanding is nearly 100%. We got to make that clear. The messenger says our misunderstanding of Jesus is nearly 100%. Don't nobody know nothing about Jesus. He ain't saying some people kind of know. Some people know 50. No. He said this misunderstanding of Jesus is nearly 100%. Then he goes on to say, he said this misunderstanding is nearly 100% among the so-called Negroes in the USA due to their following and believing what their enemies, the devils, have taught and written concerning Jesus' birth and death. I do believe that if my people, blind, deaf, and dumb, that if my poor, blind, deaf, and dumb people could be taught the true knowledge and of the true history of Jesus, they would awaken at once. This ain't what no Jew said. This ain't what a Christian, this is what the messenger said. He said no prophet is more controversial and more misunderstood than Jesus. He said the black man in America misunderstands Jesus nearly 100%. Then the messenger says, he says he believes that if the black man understood the history of Jesus, he said it will wake us up, or they would awaken at once. This is what the messenger said. We always got to be reminded of what the messenger said. So then the messenger goes on. He says, I will teach you the truth as I have received it from him who is the author of truth, regardless to whom or what. For I speak not of myself, for I too was once blind, deaf, and dumb. But I speak and write that which I have received of him, Allah, and on him do I rely. Always got to put it all in its proper perspective. Yes. When we as Muslims sit around and allow bus-stop bishop to just steal the teachings of the messenger, we actually helping them hide Master Farad Muhammad and the messenger. Because it's through these teachings and the success of the messenger is how people recognize the messenger as the messenger. Yes. You got to see the messenger for who he is. Yes. What he taught. What condition we was in and what condition he brought us out of. Yes. The black man needs to see that. He don't need to see bus stop bishop or this hypocrite Louis Eugene. We need to see the message. Yes. We need to know our condition. And we need to know what he brought us out of. Yes. To recognize God in person. Yes, sir. So the messenger says, in these series of articles, that he was going to teach us what God taught him. Because he said, I was blind, deaf, and dumb just like everybody else. Yes. But when you got bus stop, who he telling you he get his from? He don't say, I was blind, deaf, and dumb just like everybody else. But when such and so taught me, that's when I found out. Nobody does that but the messenger. Because it says in the book of, when it talks about that spirit of truth, I believe it's in Matthew. It says that spirit of truth is not going to speak of himself. The spirit of truth is going to tell you what he hears. Yes. That's the messenger. That's the messenger. He only told us what Master Farad Muhammad told him. He didn't just start teaching us about Jesus. He first let us know I was blind, deaf, and dumb like everybody else. But God came and taught me. So since he taught me, I'm about to tell you what he told me about Jesus. So let's go on even further than that. This comes from the August 24th, 1957 Pittsburgh Carrier. This one is called Jesus' History, Birth and Death from the Mouth of Allah. Continue from last week. It says Mary flees to Egypt. The messenger says Jesus and his mother were aboriginal Egyptians. Yes, sir. Because the Bible don't tell you nowhere that Jesus is black. It don't say that nowhere. So the messenger didn't say Jesus black because it said in Revelations 1:14 and 15. What he did is he told us what people Jesus came from. Yes. That's how he told us that Jesus. He didn't tell us nothing about what the Bible said. He didn't say Jesus is an Egyptian. He said Jesus is an aboriginal Egyptian. What does aboriginal mean? Because you have Egyptians that's in Egypt right now. The first fact that we need to know, the black man never called that land Egypt. Right. That's number one. The people who calling themselves Egypt today was not there when the aboriginal Egyptian was there.
Yes, sir.
When you say aboriginal, you mean the people who inhabited that land from the earliest period of time.
Yes.
So when the messenger said that Jesus was an aboriginal Egyptian, he talking about he come from the people who was in that land, the first people who was there.
Yes.
He not no Egyptian. He an aboriginal Egyptian, meaning if that's what you calling it, I'm going to let you know he was there, the people who was there the first.
Yes.
The first who to inhabit the land. That's where Jesus come from.
Yes, sir.
He was an aboriginal Egyptian. Then the messenger go on. He said, this may be the reason Joseph sent them to Egypt, so that she would be among her own people, away from the Jews whose intentions were to kill her child. Now that's another fact. The messenger breaking it down. He didn't say that she gonna stay among the Jews who her people. He said them aboriginal Egyptians is her people.
Right.
Because the Jews wanted to kill Jesus before he was born.
Yes.
We don't even never think about that. Because we accept the Bible as the messengers say on face value. If Jesus was bringing the Jews the good news, why did they want to kill him before he was born? When the Jews heard that they thought that the Messiah was going to be born, the first thing they think, we got to kill him. They wasn't expecting no good news from no Messiah. They knew that the prophets was coming to speak on their coming destruction.
Yes.
Wasn't no prophet sent to a Jew to save a Jew. The messenger said the white race was made to be destroyed. He said the white race was not made to be saved.
Right.
They were made to be destroyed. So when the good news was coming, the good news wasn't for a Jew. The good news was for the righteous. Messenger taught us we never knew who the righteous were. He said righteousness is a nature.
Yes.
God coming for the people whose nature it is to do righteousness. Not the people he got to convert to righteousness. Messenger said that Jesus could not convert the Jews to Islam. That's what he said about them. He said Jesus tried. But he said Jesus failed. And he had to pay the price for his faith. Messenger even talked about Muhammad. He talked about how it grieved Muhammad that he couldn't convert to death. Messenger say the scientists used to laugh at Muhammad for being in grief about converting to death. That's the messenger's teachings. He said Jesus was an aboriginal Egyptian. He said Joseph took Mary and Jesus to Egypt so they could be around their people and get away from the Jew. So the messenger goes on. He says the aboriginal Egyptians are people of the black nation. And even the modern people of Egypt, in fact, all original Asiatic people are of the black nation. But the American so-called Negroes think that they do not have any people except those who are in the jungles of Africa. The only people who are not members of the black nation are the white race.
Yes, sir.
So the messenger breaking it down. He said Jesus is of the black nation. He said even the modern people of Egypt, letting us know the difference. You have the modern people of Egypt, then you have the aboriginal Egyptian. Jesus come from the aboriginal Egyptian. But the modern people, who they? They are the black nation too.
Yes.
But they not the same people of Jesus people.
Right.
Two different kind of people. But they from the black nation too. Because the messenger says, the American so-called Negroes think that they do not have any people except those who are in the jungles of Africa. The only people who are not members of the black nation are the white race. So then you got Bus Stop Bishop now. They got this what they call the 12 Tribes Chart. They talking about the tribe of Judah is the African or the American blacks. The tribe of Benjamin is West Indian blacks. Levi is the Haitians. Ephraim is the Puerto Ricans. They got it broke down like everybody except the white man. Stealing from the teachings of the message. When they were small hats, they wasn't talking about all of this Puerto Ricans and Ephraims and all of that. They were just Jews with the white man. But now that they stealing the teachings of the message, they ain't gonna say they stealing it from him. But where was the 12 tribes chart in 1950?
Right.
Where was the 12 tribes chart in the 40s? In the 30s? When the messenger said God came. We got lessons that go back to 1934. Our lessons include the Native American or the Indian, however you want to call it. They are part of the original nation. We was being taught that in the 30s.
Yes.
We got documented facts about what we taught. How old is this 12 tribes chart?
Right.
But let's go on even further. So we can go from 1957, let's fast forward now to 1966. The messenger still reprinting them same articles he had about Jesus. Wasn't no black Hebrew Israelite. Wasn't all these people talking about Jesus black and he come for Israel and all that stuff we talking now. This is the messenger once again. This is June 2nd or June 3rd, 1966. The messenger says, he says these articles are written due to the mental blindness and theological knowledge of the Bible's teachings of Jesus' birth, life, teachings, and death. The making of Jesus equal to his sender, Almighty God, and more than a prophet, and a hearer of prayers, the rising from the dead and ascending into space to reach his Father in the heavens, there to await at his right hand side until the day of judgment, though he was supposed to have died to save the world. Now his return to destroy the people or world that he died to save and reconcile to God. Jesus was born according to Matthew 1:21 to save his people from their sins. He says Jesus disclaimed the Jews as being his people. John 8:44. Then who are his people that he will save from their sins? Can he hear our prayers? Is he alive in the flesh or is he dead? Who did Jesus pray to? Learn in this series on Jesus the truth and understanding of what is written of Jesus. The Bible and Holy Quran's teachings will be used on Jesus' history. Do not miss one. Not one of these articles. This the messenger. Still all by himself because he believed that if we understood the true history of Jesus, we would be resurrected overnight.
Yes.
But just like any hypocrite and disbeliever, They jealous of the messenger. They don't like the fact that the messenger is a Muslim. They wish God taught Abba. They wish God taught some Christian preacher. So what all the disbelievers do? They just take what the messenger taught and just add it to what they already believe. They don't change hardly nothing but what the messenger taught and add it to what they already believe. That's hypocrites and disbelievers. Because every disbeliever that copy the teachings of the messenger, they don't do no whole lot of explaining. Where bus stop bishop explain to us, how did you come up with all of this? Right. Just show us the book that you got, the newspaper articles, the lectures, the broadcast. Why? How did you come up with this? Right. What caused you to say that Benjamin was West Indian blacks? Because when you talk about the Bible, the messengers say, is a poison book. The Bible don't say nothing direct. Right. Just like what you have in the Bible. It refers to the white man as a dragon. There is no such thing in the world as a dragon. Right. But that's what the Bible refers to the white man. The Bible talks about a serpent in the garden. It don't tell you when it's using the poetic language or when it's talking about real history. It just starts talking about this serpent in the garden talking to Adam and Eve. We supposed to take that as history. Then it just start talking about a beast. Then in Jesus, he talking to Lazarus as if Lazarus gonna resurrect during the resurrection day. But it's talking about Lazarus like he was resurrected during Jesus' time. It don't say, okay, now this part is talking about Lazarus. It's talking about the black man. It ain't talking about right now with Jesus. It's talking about the future. It got it wrote in with all the stuff about Jesus to make us think it's talking about 2,000 years ago. So there's nothing in the Bible that's direct. That's why the messenger taught us God had to come. And when we don't make this clear to the black man, we just showing ourselves to be the hypocrite or disbeliever. Yes, sir. Because time will tell. Let's just pause for the cause real quick. I got to read this article that was written by one of my favorite Muslims, Brother Kareem Allah. I can't let the time pass by without reading this brother's article. This brother's article came out, this was May 10th, 1974. We see on the front page of the cover of the New Muhammad Speaks, it says 8-hour siege of unarmed Muslim temple, 5 arrested. We said all this Muslims had to do to get the truth to the black man. And we sit around under this hypocrite and don't say nothing for the messenger. Could you imagine the police attacking this temple for 8 hours? Could you imagine them having snipers on top of a roof, cutting the electricity and the telephone lines in here so we couldn't call nobody? This what happened, 8-hour siege of unarmed Muslim temple. Now let's go with what Brother Kareem talked about. Because his article was talking about the nation's early days. This was part 2. He said the time had come for us to show our love, devotion and respect and unity to him, meaning the messenger. He said this the Muslims did. We rallied to his defense. We were determined not to let anything stand in our way in helping him. We were his followers. It was our duty to come to his aid. He had done so much for us. He sacrificed for us 7.5 years. What I mean, he was away from us for 7.5 years. It was our time to sacrifice for him. This the kicker right here. He says, how many of you today would have stood by him and not see him in 7.5 years? That made it all real. Because I believe that brother Kareem Allah peeped that hypocrite Louis Eugene. Because one time he wrote an article about bearing witness too loud. He was talking about how these Muslims, quote unquote, be bearing witness so loud so that they can interrupt the messenger so that he can lose his train of thought. I'm telling you, go read brother Kareem Allah. He was one of them no-nonsense Muslims. He was one of them W.D. Farad Muslims. One of them I knock all the teeth out your mouth Muslims. Yes, brother Kareem Allah. So he asked them brothers in 1974, how many of you today would stand with the messenger and you ain't seen him in 7 years? When we look at this hypocrite Louis Eugene, the messenger was gone less than 6 months, and this hypocrite was mud washing the messenger.
Yes, sir.
So Kareem Allah, he wasn't impressed with all that talk, because he said, how many of you today would have stood by him and not see him in 7.5 years? He said, talk is easy. Time will prove your worth. He was then and is now our all in all. All this talking don't impress me. How many of you today would have stood with the messenger and you ain't seen him in 7 years? How many of you? Because talking is easy. So we see that this hypocrite Louis Eugene, the messenger was gone less than 6 months and he already turned on his heel. That's why we see this hypocrite today not representing the message. So brother Kareem goes on. He says, our leader needed his followers. Allah, to whom praises are due forever, tested our faith. He suffered this to happen to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to see if we would stand by him in the time of great trouble. That was one of them old school Muslims.
Yes, sir.
He said Allah suffered this to happen to the messenger to test our faith. Just to see who gonna stand with the messenger when it get tough.
Yes.
Who gonna stand for him? We can look at today. How you a Muslim, bus stop bishop can freely say about Islam. He telling the black man that Islam kills black people. Then to let you know what Muslim he talking about. He said just Christians with bean pies. Letting you know I'm talking about them old nigger Muslims. You couldn't taunt Muslims like this back with the message. That's why I like bringing brothers like Kareem Allah. Letting you know we was ready to go through it all with the message. It's our duty to come to his aid after all he did for us. That's how Muslims see it. It's your duty to come to his aid. All he did for us. So they couldn't get away with this. Oh, bus stop bishop. We got one more example that I gotta show. We gotta talk about those who copying and stealing the teachings of the messenger in this day. This is an article that's called The Creation of the Devil and the End of the White Man's Rule. The Theological Influence of the Nation of Islam on early black theology. Since we don't want to give the messenger credit, we don't want to say nothing for him, let's listen to what the white man said. This article was written in 2020. Because if you look at the messenger's history, you look at the condition of the black man, you look at what the messenger was saying and then what the black man started to say, you would know the theological influence of the Nation of Islam on early black theology. So it says, drawing upon the writings of the radical black nationalist minister Albert B. Cleage Jr., this article examines the importance of what Clegg termed the Nation of Islam's black cultural mythology in providing the possibility of a break in identification with white Christianity. In particular, it traces the influence of the Nations of Islam's proclamation of God's imminent apocalyptic destruction of white America on the theology of James H. Cone and Clegg. Moving along. So then we see they talking about Clegg. We see Albert Clegg. This is the March 28th, 1970 Detroit Free Press. It says, new denomination of black militants being launched here. It says a new black nationalist denomination will be launched next week in Detroit. This was Robert Clegg. It says Mr. Cleage or Clegg expects 250 persons, among them young delegates from universities and 20 black Jewish rabbis from New York, Philadelphia, and at the convention. Speakers at the session, which will be closed to whites, are Cobb, Rabbi Rudolph Windsor. That's what I wanted to get to. This was Clegg setting up a new denomination because Bus Stop Bishop gonna act like we always believe this. Why would a black Jewish rabbi, if you always been, why would you come to this Christian preacher's little new denomination? You would just continue to teach what you've been teaching. But Clegg was coming up with a new denomination. He had young people from the university and 20 black Jewish rabbis. One of them Jews was named Rudolph Windsor. Rudolph Windsor is now with Bus Stop Bishop. He was a rabbi in 1970. This another good one about old Rudolph Windsor. This article comes out in March of 1970. This article with him, with the white Jew, come out December 12, 1970. Almost a whole year after this one. This one they talking about whites can't come to this. But this old Rudolph getting a Torah from the white Jew. It says Torah for black Jews. A significant act of brotherhood by Har Zion Temple, Philadelphia, was the presentation of a Torah, sacred scroll of 5 books of Moses to the black Jewish congregation. Now, why don't it say the Bible? This say they giving them to these Jews the 5 books of Moses. They was not accepting the New Testament as Jews. Right. I want to make that point crystal clear. He in there breaking down the New Testament for Bus Stop and them now. But back in 1970, all that teaching the messenger was doing about the New Testament and Jesus, now he in here with these Jews just getting the 5 books of Moses. Because a Jew rejects Jesus They reject the gospel and the New Testament. One last picture. This comes from the Muhammad Speaks. This is the May 13th, 1963 Muhammad Speaks. Guess who we see? Old Cleavage. It says time is now. Detroit minister supports Muslims fight for freedom. These hypocrites, I'm supporting. That's why you can't trust everybody to come around. Right. Ain't no, oh, my black bro. Because the one thing I like how the messenger talked about hypocrites. He said, we got it in black and white that you said you believe. Messenger got it in black and white with all these people would come around. Take a picture of this disbelief. Right. Take a picture of this disbeliever looking into my paper. Take a picture of this disbeliever saying what he's saying for my program. Let everybody know he was just a regular old Christian preacher before he started copying what I was teaching. So then you got old Cleavage. It says, joining the drive to push Muhammad Speaks newspaper in Detroit area, Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr. declares, he says, I am closer to the Muslims' position than to any position that's been enunciated here tonight. So this old Clegg talking about because he don't have a position. He say, I'm closer to the Muslims' position. He wasn't in there saying he got a position. I'm closer to their position than anybody that's speaking in here tonight. We got you in black and white. Because the messenger did not teach us that the Israelites was black. They make the Israelites black because the messenger said the mental resurrection is those who accept Allah, his messenger, and Islam. So what these fakes try to do, they try to make the Israelites black. To say Jesus was coming for the Israelites. But the messenger led us to know, no, Jesus was not coming for the Israelites. The Israelites wanted to kill Jesus when they found out he was being born. They had to keep Jesus' birth a secret from the Jew. Not only did they have to keep it a secret, Joseph had to let Mary go all the way to her original people in Egypt to get away from the Jew. Jesus came, the messenger said, trying to convert the Jew to Islam. He said the Jews rejected Jesus and they rejected his message. He said, so Jesus stopped trying to convert the Jew. He told the Jew, the truth is not in you. He said, ye are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. That's the history of the Jews that Jesus learned. They are their father. They gonna do what their nature tell them to do. They not gonna submit to Islam. So Jesus stopped trying to talk to the Jew. But Jesus said, he said, when he comes, he said, he will lead you into all truth. Yes. That's that spirit of truth. That spirit of truth is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Well, brothers and sisters, we don't want to prolong the time. So I leave you as I came in the nation of Islam, greeting words of peace of Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam.
Enjoying the show? Help keep us on the air. 313-371-7033. That's 313-371-7033 to make a donation.
Brothers and sisters, we rise with prayer. In the name of Allah, the beneficent and merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the beneficent and merciful, sole master's day of judgment in which we now live. The alone do we serve, and the alone seeks for thine help and aid. O Allah, please guide us on the right path, path of those upon whom thou bestow thy favors, not on the path of those upon whom thy wrath is brought down, nor those who go astray after they heard thy teachings. Say he Allah is one God. Allah is he of whom nothing is independent, but upon whom we all depend. He begetteth not, nor is he begotten, there is none like him. And I bear witness that none deserve to be served, worship, or praise besides Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. And I bear witness that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is thy true servant and last apostle. Ameen. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us not to do anything to anyone that we wouldn't have done it to ourselves, to treat everybody right, even the devil. Assalamu alaikum.